All right, welcome to another live stream. Back at it again this week, of course, with some Titanic related stuff, as always. I kind of figured that by the title, of course. So this week, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to be just comparing and contrasting the two most popular Titanic movies. Of course, the James Cameron 1997 film and the film A Night to Remember from 1958. Uh, they're the best two, like I said, in my opinion, and I'm bringing an old friend of mine on board to discuss that. He'll be joining us via audio. His name is Tim, and Tim, welcome to Titanic.
Well, it's good to be here. I've never been on the ship before, so hopefully don't we don't crash to an iceberg tonight.
Correct. That's kind of the agenda here. So, question for you, my friend.
Okay,
First of all, can you hear yourself on the stream?
let me see. Well, it's good to be here. Yeah, I can hear myself.
Okay, great.
I can
Just a quick
on air.
audio test because I had a lot of issues last week trying to get things going. So I just wanted to make sure we're all good to go this week. So a little backstory for you and I personally. You and I met many, many years ago through a podcast that you had started and I eventually joined on board as co-host for. And
That I
I'll let
asked you to join on the spot, like that night after we'd finished recording an episode.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even remember how it came about that you invited me on, but it was after that one episode, boom, it just gelled, and I was like, next thing I
We're
know,
like,
I'm
like this
I'm
is
your
good. Let's just
co-host.
keep this. Let's just keep this going.
It was natural. It was natural.
Right. That's
Uh,
right.
it was a podcast called the Crossroads Podcast. It was a podcast about the TV show Supernatural that we had done for a few years. We kind of had a revolving door of rotating hosts throughout the tenure
Yeah.
of that show.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But it was fun all the same. So,
Absolutely.
and
A
this was, of
blast.
course, back in the days before celebrities started doing podcasts and making money off of them.
Yes, yes. This was back when you had to basically edit all the things yourself. You had to supply you had to watch the episode, you had to take down notes, you had to do your own music. It's funny because I've listened to a couple of those celebrity podcasts and they're just like, yes, like we have this person doing this. I'm like, shut the heck up.
Right? Yeah.
Uh,
So and it's essentially the same way now. If you're a small time YouTuber like me, you still, I'm not making money off this, so I gotta make my own videos. I gotta film them. I gotta record them. I gotta edit them. I've gotta post them, so forth and so on.
yeah.
But it's been really cool so far. We just recently passed 700 subscribers on the channel. I'm super thrilled about that. I thank everyone who has subscribed to the channel and looking forward to getting more content out to you guys and continuing to grow the channel. And live streams are going to be a part of that going forward. I've got this new format where we're not going to be literally playing games. I mean, we've got this Titanic game loaded up because it's relevant to the discussion we're going to have. So that's why this is here. But other than that, I'm not going to be a game streaming channel, if that
There's already
makes
enough of those.
sense. Right. We'd just be lost in the mix.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the spot where Jack is talking to Rose and saying like saying the "you jump I jump" thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, unfortunately, you are mistaken here.
Okay, no, I'm
So,
thinking about during the day, not when they're like on the edge of the aft. I think.
okay, so you can see the game, correct?
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is let's just go ahead and jump right into the movies here, and we'll start with that one. So if you remember at the beginning of the movie when they
Okay,
do,
okay, okay. See, it was the windows that was throwing me off. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
so
I got
they're getting out the car, they're walking up the gangplank to board the ship.
right.
This
Okay,
is right where they walk into. So this would be the D deck reception area.
okay.
So we'll do a tour of this, and will come in through here into these wooden doors, and this area should probably look familiar to you. This is the famous dinner scene from the movie.
Ah, yes, yes. Okay.
So, and I know there's a delay on your end, so I'll pause from moving around the ship every so often, so you can catch up.
Sure.
I should be going through the doors right now.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
this is where Rose is telling him about some of the passengers on the ship. She's telling him about John Jacob Astor and whoever else, and
Right.
we'll mosey on into the actual dining area where they do the whole making it count scene where they're having the dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see it now. Yeah.
Okay. The game's a little choppy on my end for some reason. It's usually not this bad, but you can still see it. That's what counts. I'll give the game a
Intended
second
for-
for it to catch up. So this area should also look familiar to
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is also, if you recall, the scene where they're singing they're having the church service on the
That's
Sunday
right.
morning.
That's
Yeah,
right. I guess. Yes. I was gonna say something about that, but I wasn't
right.
quite sure. But yeah, yeah, it definitely looks familiar. Yeah. Yeah.
So since we started off with the Titanic Cameron movie, um, what did you know of the Titanic before that movie, or
I
did you know
think
anything at all about it?
because I was a teenager when that movie came out, and I think I knew of it. Like I think I knew the Titanic hit an iceberg, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you kind of knew the basic thing, ship
Yeah, I
hits
knew the
iceberg.
basic thing, and but then seeing the movie in the theater was just such a grand experience, and I was just totally blown away by the movie, um, and and so much so that I watched the movie when it came on videotape. And this is, for you younger people in our viewing audience, this is back when movies were on VHS tapes and they didn't have DVDs or streaming or anything like that. So the movie was on two cassette tapes.
Yep,
And
I remember that.
since the majority of the sinking scenes were on the second tape, I wore that that second tape down so much so that the little top thing that's on the top of the video cassette
Hmm.
broke. Um, and
So,
so yeah,
is it fair to say you're a fan of the movie then, if you've watched it that many
I
times?
I was a huge fan of the movie. I still am a huge fan of the movie. I watching this movie, I can quote it like as I can quote it as they're saying the dialogue because I've seen it that many times.
Okay, so you
Uh,
probably you might probably know it better than I do because I can't
Probably.
quote the movie to you.
I
Here's the thing. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to approach this from two different perspectives. So, for those who don't know you like I do, you are into writing, into storytelling,
yes,
and I have a feeling you'll approach this discussion more from that perspective, where I will approach it more from the historical event
sure,
perspective.
sure,
Is
sure.
that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. And that is a very fair statement. In fact, watching the movie now, it's different than when I watched it, when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I would never watch the scene in the present day. I would just skip right to when I would just fast forward it right to when we get to the Titanic. Because I'm like, I don't need this. Like
Right.
it's stupid. I don't need to watch this part of the movie. So yeah, and so and I sometimes have a tendency to do that, but I don't do that as much anymore. Just because I appreciate what those scenes are trying to do.
Well, we've got
And
someone in the chat. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Austin Hyde. He says, "Great stuff, guys." Thank you very much, Austin. Appreciate that. I hope you stick around and enjoy the discussion.
yeah, Austin's a good friend of mine. He and I met in a math class,
Oh,
and
excellent, excellent.
had shared a love of Star Wars and other things and movies and things like that. And we've kept in touch since the class ended. So thanks for stopping by, Austin. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, you and I are both huge Star Wars and Star Trek nerds, but that's for a different discussion.
That's that that's for the Wrath of Khan episode.
Correct, correct. Hey, that is ship related. I'm.
I was gonna ask you about that, but I thought that might have been just like maybe like teetering on the line of, well, that's not really a real ship. So
It's not a real ship, but however, we did talk about discussing the Poseidon Adventure. That's not a real ship either.
there you go. There you go.
Granted, they used a real ship, a ship I happen to very much like. But anyway,
Right.
um, so after watching the movie, and I'm asking you this because I've heard this from a lot of people younger than both of us. There's two YouTubers I watch that they're way younger than I am and probably know more about the Titanic than I could ever imagine to know about it.
Sure.
And they have said that this movie is what inspired them to do research and learn about the ship. So, for me, well, I'll let you answer this question first. Did the movie ever motivate you to do any research into the ship, or were you just good, with what you learned about it from the
It was
movie?
just good, but but like as I've watched the movie over and over again, like I want to know like what's real and what's not. And I've done a lot of recent research about it, and um, like watching certain documentaries and things like that. But it did inspire me to like wonder what really happened. Now, naturally, I was young, so I
Right.
didn't have all the information that people have now. But I think that's a sentiment that was true when the time the movie came out, and I think it's even truer now that it's streaming, and people have the internet at their disposal to look up all these facts. Because if I jump ahead, A Night to Remember, while a good movie, I liked the Cameron movie a lot better because I really appreciate him as a director more, and what
Mhm.
he does to tell his stories. But I think A Night to Remember, I think, could have been improved had the information that Cameron had at the time that he made his film. Oh yeah, there it is. That's that's where
There's the grand staircase.
that's their case. Um, uh,
So not to cut you off, but real quick, at the top of the staircase, you'll see where he is. Leo says, do you want to go to a real party? All that. This game is called Titanic Honor and Glory because of the two ladies on the clock. One is called Honor, one is called Glory.
that's cool. That's cool.
So,
Uh,
anyway, you were saying.
yeah, but a quick minor thing when Jack kisses Rose on the hand, he says, "I saw that in a Nickelodeon, and I always wanted to do it." For some reason,
Yes.
when I was younger, I always thought he said, "I saw that on Nickelodeon." I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there was no Nickelodeon back then.
No, there was not. But what was I saying? I don't even remember.
We're talking about the movie. I think I lost my chain of thought with where you were going with it too.
Oh yes, I think not, I liked A Night to Remember, but I like the Cameron movie better because I think it has the benefit. I think it has the benefit that Cameron did a lot more research.
Well,
Um,
and he had access to a lot more information than what they had at the time
it's true.
of A Night to Remember. Because that's the
Yeah.
thing with A Night to Remember. For those who may not know, again, that movie was filmed in 1958. That's 28 years before the wreck was discovered. And up until the wreck was discovered, it was widely assumed that the ship sank intact because one of the
Right.
officers, I forget which one, at the inquiries testified that the ship sank intact despite
Huh.
other eyewitnesses saying that they saw the ship break in two, but I guess the inquiry decided to believe what the officer said over the other people. So that was always the
Right.
uh,
Right. And
accepted as truth
it
until
was
the wreck
probably
was discovered.
judged that the officer had a deeper sense of you know command and control than some of the other passengers or people who were on there. They thought maybe
Right.
like trauma had something to do with that or something. So
Very possible.
yeah.
So yeah, and I can understand why they would probably want to take an officer's word, but as we have obviously discovered in 1985, it didn't exactly happen that way.
Dr. Ballard, yeah.
So yep, Robert Ballard. I know someone who actually has his autograph and the autograph of Milvina Dean, who was the last living survivor to pass away.
So
So
and I think A Night to Remember took a more of a historical, like, it focused on a lot more of the real people,
yes.
and which I think there were, ooh, that's pretty. Uh, um, I've been on a few Disney cruise ships, and that just reminds me of going up on deck. Um,
Yeah, we're gonna have a look around the officers' quarters, and I'm gonna take you to the wireless room.
Awesome. Um, and Yeah, it's cool. I lose my train of thought because, like, oh, that's neat.
Right?
Lifeboats, that's cool. Uh,
Yeah, I'm gonna take you
um,
all around the ship. Don't worry, you're gonna get to see it all.
oh, it's great. It's great. Um, See, I don't even remember what I was saying.
We were
But
talking about how A Night to Remember took more of a historical approach to the actual event, which I agree with 100%. I've always, as I explained to you, and a little pulling back the curtain a little bit, you watched the movie for the first time, A Night to Remember, a couple of days ago,
yes.
and based on my recommendation, obviously,
Mhm.
and
I'd never seen it until that point.
correct. And the way I explained it to you was A Night to Remember takes more of a documentary style approach, whereas Cameron's is more of a Hollywood love story type approach.
Sure. And both approaches are good.
Correct.
Um,
Well, what's great about it is with both movies, and they're both excellent films in their each in their own way. You can have the best of both worlds with the Titanic story.
yeah, absolutely.
So let's get right. Let's jump into A Night to Remember for a second. What was your initial thoughts of the movie?
I was very impressed with the effects. Um, with how they portrayed the iceberg, and someone just messaged me and saying there's more than one Titanic movie.
Yeah, there's actually a whole lot more than you
There's a
realize.
ton. Like,
Yes.
I was looking up Titanic, and I'm like, oh, there's this one, and there's this one. There's a ton. Um, and But yeah, like the effects, like how they made the iceberg look. I was surprised with um, how much visually the crashing into the iceberg that Cameron borrowed from this movie into his own film,
Right.
as almost like an homage. Like, he wasn't like copying it or aping it or anything. It was just more like a loving homage to that film.
Yeah, I didn't feel like he was ripping that movie off. He borrowed a couple of scenes, he borrowed a couple of lines from the movie,
Mhm.
which to me was kind of like, hey, a little his own little love letter to that movie, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
Um,
because
you did
I've no doubt that he looked into all the different. I'm sure he's watched all the Titanic films, up until when he made his,
yes,
um, and so and putting those touches was very nice,
or at least that one for sure, because
for sure.
the part after when the collision is happening and the ice is falling onto the well deck, you could tell he borrowed that from A Night to Remember. There's a shot of Ismay in the lifeboat, and it's a real
Uh
close
huh.
up shot of
Yeah.
him, and the ship is
Mhm.
behind him, halfway submerged. He borrowed
Yeah.
that, and a
Hmm.
couple of lines involving Andrews. He borrowed those from the movie as well.
Oh, sure, sure. There's lines that are lifted right off of this movie and into Cameron.
Absolutely.
But
For example, won't you make a try for it, Mr. Andrews?
yes, yes. And Mr. Andrews, like, standing at the clock, and fiddling with it. Um,
Yes.
that was very nice. Also, what this movie did, that like it really explained like why the Titanic was going to sink and why this iceberg like would rupture it. And he's like, well,
Yeah.
and like Mr.
He,
Andrews broke it down like through the schematics, which I appreciated because
yes.
it helped to make sense of it.
Yes,
Um,
I do think A Night to Remember did that better as well. Real
oh
quick,
yes.
we are actually looking inside the inner bridge here. This is where the ship would have actually been steered right here,
Mhm.
not on the outer one we were just in.
Right.
Just in case you may not have known that.
And
But anyway,
this is where the water comes in on Smith, I think.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And after we look at this, we're going out, and I'm going to show you where the last reported position of Andrews and Captain Smith really was, according to eyewitnesses.
Oh, interesting.
So you can see we're going out to the bridge wing here. This is on the port side. Somewhere in this area, it is believed that Smith and Andrews were both in this spot, and one of them said to the other, I forget how exactly it went, but this was right around 2 o'clock in the morning. They said, one of them said to the other, there's not much time left. She's going fast. And both of them allegedly jumped into the water from this point.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So that was one thing neither movie covered. They both had their own portrayal. Well, actually, A Night to Remember did not show Captain Smith meeting
Dying.
his end.
Yeah.
And really, it didn't. Neither one of them showed Andrews either. He's sitting in, I believe it's the smoking lounge, first class lounge. I could
Right.
be
Yeah.
wrong on that, but
Andrews is in the lounge standing by. I think the last shot of Andrews that you see is him standing at the clock.
and that's in either movie. Well, he's sitting down in Night to Remember, and yeah, in Cameron's movie,
Standing up.
he's fixing the clock.
Yeah, which he
Right.
does in a to remember, but it's earlier.
Yeah, not a lot earlier, but earlier. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we were talking about. I'm gonna go to the starboard side so we can get the sun shining on the deck. We were talking about how A Night to Remember doesn't portray the sinking as accurately, and again, we've explained why. But one of the things with Andrews is doing the thing with the schematic, and he says a 300-foot gash, basically from the very bow to basically just aft of the first funnel. We know now that wasn't exactly the case. It was more or less like punctures throughout the
Right.
first 5 watertight compartments. So that was one of the things they didn't get right either. I think even since '97, they've changed the theory up a little bit, like official historians. But
Uh-huh.
for the most part, it is what Cameron said in his movie.
Right.
So yeah, that just goes back to Cameron having access to better information than what they had in 1958.
Right.
One thing I will say that really bugged me about the Cameron's movie, and and again, this is the history buff in me talking
Sure.
here.
Oh, are we going to talk about the thing?
Yeah, we're getting into that thing. You probably know where I'm
Okay.
going to go with this.
Yes, I do. I know. We've talked about this.
Um, Real quick, we're amidship here, and we're coming up onto the what is called the compass platform. That is the most magnetically neutral spot on the ship. In case you ever wondered what that thing was,
Okay.
it's right here between the second and the third funnel, and it's right around here is where the breakup actually happened. But
Okay.
Cameron, well, first of all, Jack and Rose. The whole point of Jack and Rose in this movie, from the storyteller perspective, is to give the viewer a human attachment, emotional connection to people on the show, because
Yeah,
you can
it's
only
an audience point of view.
correct.
Yeah.
He wants you to feel that loss after the ship is gone. That's how he's trying his best to engage you, in what's going on. You can only go so far with that when you are actually talking about the real people that were on the ship. Now, he took a few liberties with some people. One that I'm not a particular fan of. I imagine most people who are Titanic buffs are not either. And that is the liberties that he took with his portrayal of William Murdoch. Um, do you remember who Murdoch was in the Cameron movie?
Yes, he was. He was. He was the first officer. Um,
Yes.
and he had a gun, and shot somebody, and then proceeded to shoot himself. He was bought off by Cal,
Yeah.
Billy Zane's character. Um,
Okay. I think I lost connection there with Tim for a second. Going to walk around the ship a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that scene for a little bit while we reestablish connection with him. So, what we were going to talk about was the liberties that James Cameron took with the with William Murdoch. And let's see, just bear with me a sec. And as he was about to say, William Murdoch took a payoff from the character of Cal to reserve him a life spot, or a life spot, a spot on the lifeboat, which there is no way to historically prove that happened. Also, as he was saying, Murdoch shoots someone and then he takes his own life. We have no way at all of verifying that any of this actually happened. There is no proof that any of this happened. And that's just Cameron taking some liberties as a storyteller, which might have taken them a bit too far. Um, Definitely not something I was a big fan of, as you can tell. Didn't take as much liberties with other people. He portrays Ismay in the same way everyone else has ever portrayed Ismay, which is, the kind of the kind of naive business owner, and we'll get more into Ismay in a minute. I think we're about to reconnect with Tim here. Uh, our little call ended abruptly, and I think we have him back.
yes, I'm back now.
Excellent. Yeah, so Zoom kind of abruptly ended our call. I'm not sure exactly why. But we'll pick up right where we were about to leave off. We were talking about Murdoch. I kind of gave my thoughts a little bit on it while we were trying to reestablish the connection. So I'll let you convey your opinion
I
on it
don't
now.
think I don't like now knowing what I know about Murdoch, and because there are there are reports that I looked up that there was an officer that you know shot himself, but it wasn't Will Murdoch, and I kind of like the explanation that Cameron gave is I like because he was looking at it from a story point of view, and like as I'm telling the story, I'm thinking, how does this lead to this and does this lead to that, and he admits that he made a mistake, and I think he did, and
Yes.
because now looking back on it, it really doesn't really add anything to it doesn't add anything to the story, I don't think. Uh,
No, not. I can't think of
and
any way that it does.
It doesn't really. It's just, I mean, I guess if you want. I think he wanted to convey how this disaster that was just not letting up um, uh, was affecting him, and I can understand that. But I think they could have just created a fictional character and not used him.
Right, and there were reports and rumors that an officer did commit suicide, but there was
Uh-huh.
nothing ever proven that it was William Murdoch, and there was no
Right.
proof that no one ever saw an actual officer actually do it.
Yeah, yeah. And Cameron wanted to. Anyway, that was my son.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
uh, um, and I guess Cameron just wanted to put, like, he wanted to convey this story in his film, but he didn't want it to just be some nameless officer. He wanted it to have an impact, and later he regrets doing that. He's confessed that publicly. Um,
Yes.
you can actually find it. It's on the 20 years later James Cameron documentary that's on Disney Plus.
Yes, he
Right.
actually had a sit down with descendants of several of the ancestors.
Mhm.
William Murdoch's descendants were not among that group, but Isidore and Ida Strauss's were.
Yes.
Molly Brown's was,
Mhm.
and I believe John Jacob Astor's granddaughter was in
Yes.
that as
Yes.
well.
Yes. So yeah, um, I think that like sometimes you want to tell a story and you don't really think like when you're even though you're using historical events as the backdrop for your story, you're just like, well, this just makes the most story sense.
Right.
and and you don't think about how this affected the people that were in this disaster. And
Correct.
he lost sight of that. And you know what, we all make mistakes when we're telling stories. I have. um and so yeah. And
Yeah.
so
It's
I it's okay. I think it's okay now that he knows better, and such. But it does take me out of it a little bit now that I know the truth.
yeah, and again, you can't. Neither movie could get 100% of the things correct. I
Of
mean,
course not, because history's always changing.
right, but that is one thing where, and I don't want to harp on it too much since I've kind of already said how I feel about it. But it's one of those things. He's admitted he shouldn't have done it, and I agree with him wholeheartedly on that. But that's the historian in me. I want it as doggone accurate as it can possibly be. I'm a stickler
Sure.
for
And
that.
like I think there are a lot of things that he got like 100% right. The way the ship looked, the way the costumes, is just spot on because like he had, and in A Night to Remember as well, looks really great. Um,
For its
and
time, yes, absolutely.
yeah, for its time, it's great. I marvel that like like the sinking. I was reminded of the parting of the Red Sea from the Ten Commandments.
In what way?
Uh, just the way the water looked, because like the Ten Commandments came out like a couple years before this, so I would imagine that the effects would be similar.
Okay.
Um, and so it just looked like this, like as water's coming in, it just looked like that.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I preferred about A Night to Remember, again, we said it takes more of a documentary style approach than the Cameron movie. And what I really, really dug was seeing things from the perspective of both the Californian and the Carpathia. That is something
I liked
Cameron,
that too. I liked that too. Like
yes,
when they would do that, it would jarred me a little bit because I didn't know what we were looking at. Like, are we still on Titanic? But no, we're not. We're on the Californian. We're on the Carpathia. And we don't see we. I mean, the most we see of the Carpathia is at the end.
Right. But
So
it's one of my favorite scenes where they got it pretty close from what I understand when Carpathia the way it went down as I recall is after Titanic hit the berg, Carpathia was on its way. I believe it was going to the Mediterranean, and Harold Cotta, which was the Carpathia's wireless operator, radioed in to Harold Bride, who was on the Titanic, and he's like, I say, old man, you got a backlog of messages here or something like that. And to which Phillips replies, "Come at once. We are sinking. This is a CQD, old man." And Cottam's like, and I'm paraphrasing with all this. Cottam's like, should I go tell my captain? And he's like, absolutely. Go tell your captain, please. And that's when you get that scene in A Night to Remember where he barges into the captain's room. He's like, sir, sir. And Rostron's like, what the devil? Haven't you learned to knock before you walk in here? He's like, sir, the Titanic, she's sinking, blah, blah, blah. And I loved it because Rostron, he look. It almost looks like he doesn't even read the whole telegram. He looks at his
he doesn't need to at that point.
he looks at his CO and he's like, Mr. Dean, turn the ship around, head northwest. I'll work the course out for you. And as I understand it, in real time, like in a real world, he didn't even verify that it was actually the Titanic until the ship was already turned and heading that way. That's how determined that man was to get there. And
Yeah,
I felt like they really did a good job of portraying Arthur Rostron in that movie.
yeah, yeah.
Because you get to other scenes later where he's talking, keep our passengers inside their cabins. Don't let them warm around. Get blankets and hot chocolate and coffee, to the right to where they were going to receive the survivors in. Get our lifeboats ready. He posted more lookouts at the bow for icebergs because they're going into this. They've got to go into the same ice field the Titanic was in to try and get
Right.
to the survivors. So it's just all of that culmination of things, and they didn't show all that in the movie, but they showed enough of how determined Rostron was to get there. Because really, nobody knew exactly if the Titanic was still around, or did she sink, or was her power so depleted that her wireless operators could not send messages anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Rostron was desperate in his mind to try and get there before the ship went down. Just unfortunately, he couldn't. There was no possible way for him to do that.
Yeah. And if I may, play devil's advocate for James Cameron's movie for a little bit, I think
Sure.
they didn't do that because I think, just like we said, Jack and Rose were our POV characters, and
Yes.
so we're seeing a lot of it. A lot of it. I mean, there's a couple things there's a lot. There's quite a bit that it's not there when they're around, but it's predominantly through their eyes, and so
Yes.
it would make sense why we wouldn't see the Carpathia and the Olympic, because we're seeing things
Or
through
the
Jack and Rose,
Californian.
or the California. I'm sorry, I'm messing up my ships.
No, you're
Uh,
good.
Crucify me while you got me.
Oh no, but
Um,
hey, in case you ever wondered what was going on with the Olympic at the time, the Olympic was actually on her way back from New York to Southampton when
Interesting.
Titanic struck the berg. Olympic was in communication with the Titanic, but the Olympic was over 400 miles away.
Right.
So there was no possible way at all the Olympic could render any assistance.
Right. Right. But that's probably why we didn't see any of that. But we've talked about, and there is a lot of crossover with historical characters that do play a big role in both films. One of them is J. Bruce Ismay, um, whose position on the ship I know he's a bigwig, but I always forget what his role was.
Well,
But
he was the director of the White Star Line.
okay, 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 all right. So, um, I feel like that in the Cameron film, he was way more mustache twirly. Um,
I would agree to that. Yes.
yeah, he's way more mustache twirly in that movie. Um, and whereas in A Night to Remember, I really feel for him a lot of times. Um,
He's
and
a difficult person in the sense that
yeah,
how can I
it's
put it?
tough.
It
It's tough
is.
because you want to feel bad for him because this thing didn't work out. And when he got off, because I looked him up, and when he got off, he got a lot of crap, and rightfully so. Um,
A lot of
like,
it, to a large degree, I feel like he brought on himself.
oh sure,
But
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's the scene in the Cameron film where he's talking to Smith, and he's like, "Well, you haven't lit the last four boilers yet. Like we want to get there faster. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could be there ahead of schedule,
right.
and stuff?" And he doesn't know anything about running a ship. He's just directing.
No,
Um,
to quote him, he's a passenger on his.
yes,
He just happens to
and maybe a
basically
past,
on the ship.
yeah. Um, and uh, um, and I feel like that in like I said in the Cameron film, he's way more mustache twirly.
I agree.
Um, and I I mean I don't because at the time when I'm supposed to feel bad for him, I don't.
Yeah.
uh,
And there's one thing I wish that Cameron would. There's a deleted scene involving Ismay that I wish
I
is.
was gonna bring that up. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna bring
you
that
know
up,
where I'm
and
going
I
to go
love
with
it.
this. So
I love it
basically,
so much.
Officer Lowe, uh, Ismay basically has a panic attack, and and this is deleted from the Cameron movie, and he's running up to some of the ropes that are on the davits that's lowering the lifeboats, and he's there. There's no time. Lower away, and he's freaking out. And Officer Lowe goes up to him, a real person, also by the way. He's like, "You bloody idiot! You want me to drown the lot of them?" And he says, Ismay says,
Do
"Do
you know
you
who I
know
am?
who I am?" And Lowe says, "You're a passenger, and I'm a ship's bloody officer. Now do as you're told." I
Yeah,
just dig that scene. I don't know
it's
why.
good. It's
I
good.
really dig that scene. And you may or may not have known this, but Officer Lowe in Titanic was Mr. Fantastic in the Jessica
I
Alba
did. I did know
movies.
that. Yes.
Okay.
um, after that movie came, after those movies came out, as awful as they are,
Yeah.
um, and then when I'd see him in Titanic, I'm like, that's Reed Richards.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's funny.
Now, one movie that I think, well, one movie, we're only talking about two. One character, one historical figure that I preferred the performance slightly more, not by much, but slightly
Okay.
more, is Molly Brown in A Night to Remember. I feel like, and more so, it's not that I didn't like Kathy Bates. I loved Kathy Bates in the role. I thought she was
Sure.
great. But
Oh, sure.
from a screenwriting perspective, I thought that they got her more accurate. Because in the lifeboat, she is arguing, and I don't know if you know this, but the guy who was in charge of that lifeboat was Robert Hitchens. He's a quartermaster. He was the man
Right.
who was physically steering the ship when it hit the berg.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I did know that.
Okay, so he and her are arguing back and forth, and she says in the movie "A Night to Remember," "Don't get smart with me, Sonny. I'll throw you overboard." And apparently, from all eyewitness accounts, she took control of that boat
Yeah.
because people eventually got fed up with how Hitchin was running things. Whereas in the Cameron movie, it seems like he gets the final word. He tells her, there's going to be one less
He
person,
shuts
and
it
if you don't
down. He
shut
sh-
that hole in your face, and
yeah.
she just kind of shuts up and sits down.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I definitely think that because I love Kathy Bates, but I feel like that more of Kathy Bates bled into Molly Brown in the Cameron film.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um, and I understand why Molly Brown was essentially shut down during that last sequence. Cameron wanted to maintain a tone, and he couldn't maintain that tone. I don't think could maintain that tone properly. um, if it because sometimes you got to pick, like when you're telling a story, you got to pick what historical accuracies you want to keep that are going to help your story, and what historical accuracies you unfortunately have to sacrifice. Um,
Okay,
so
that's fair. I can
yeah,
see your point with that.
yeah, it's just like you turning a book into a movie. You want to obviously have everything, but you can't have everything. I mean, to me, if I may just take a tangent here, Lord of the Rings is my favorite book to movie adaptation that I've ever seen. Um,
Hmm.
because it knew what things to take out and what things to keep or change, and that's why I hold the Cameron Titanic movie in higher esteem. Um, in such high esteem is because Cameron knew what to. Obviously, we've talked about a mistake he made, but he knew what would work and what wouldn't.
Okay.
That's my opinion. So
So, you see, we're heading down the grand staircase. We were
yes.
just on the subject of Molly Brown. I'm going to show you what I believe was her room.
Oh, cool, cool.
I'm not
Um,
100%, but I think this was her room that you're going to see in a minute. It'll be a cabin E23.
and on the subject of Molly Brown, when I saw uh, I knew of a musical called or another film called The Unsinkable Molly Brown.
I've heard
Uh,
of it. I have never seen it.
I've never seen it either. So I figured that naive 13-year-old Tim thought that that the movie had just made up that character from that movie, and
Okay.
just put her in Titanic.
Hmm.
um, it wasn't until later that I realized that this is where she was, and um, so knowing that definitely changed the way I looked at Molly Brown as a character, because I also really liked the way she took charge and was a real fiery person. Um,
Yes.
and I do think Kathy Bates is good for that, because she definitely plays really good fiery people in movies she's in. Um, uh, but there were times when it was just too much at times.
Hmm. So,
Um,
we're in the Turkish bath, by the way, and if you notice this tile on the wall, this is some of the most well preserved stuff on the ship.
wow.
Yeah, you can still see. I believe it was Cameron who actually went into the Turkish bath and showed us how it looked, and it looks really well. The swimming pool here, they've never been able to access it because this bulkhead is closed.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to cut you off, but just showing you some more stuff around the ship.
No, it's fine. Um, now we talked about deleted scenes from the Cameron film. Um, is the one with Ismay and Lowe your favorite, or is there another one that you wish had been kept in?
Off the top of my head, that is the only one I could think of that I really wish he would have kept. Because, for one, I thought it was really a great scene, and it's also really short, so it wouldn't have added a whole lot of extra time to what's already a bit of a long movie.
Right.
So,
I really like that one, but my other favorite one was with the Strausses.
yes, and that's another thing that, A Night to Remember did, that Cameron, for
Yeah,
whatever reason, he filmed it, but he didn't keep it.
yeah. I mean, and like you said, it's an already long movie,
Yes.
and and the thing with movies is pacing. You got to keep things moving. Otherwise the audience is just going to tune out and it's going to get bored. So I get why he cut it out. I just would rather it would have added more weight, because we do see the Strausses later, as Near My God to Thee is playing. Also, another thing, two different versions, and I know there are two different versions of Near My God to Thee. I'm
There are
very well familiar.
Um, and you're. I hope you're okay with me divulging this, but you're a bit more of a person of faith than I am. Not
Yes.
So you would probably know that better than me, but I will say that Eva Hart, who was one of the survivors, I'll tell a story about her real quick.
Okay,
So she emphatically stated, because there was some debate as to whether or not "Nearer My God to Thee" was the final song that the band played.
sure.
Some people thought that they heard a song called "Autumn" being played as the final song,
I've
but
heard this. I think. Yeah.
yeah, Eva Hart emphatically confirmed that it was "Nearer My God to Thee." And after the sinking, she tells this story of she was in church one time and they started singing that song in church, and she ran out of there, in a panic, crying because of, it instantly made her think about the sinking.
Right.
And in that story, though, she says there are three versions of that song. So that's what I was
Okay.
ultimately getting to. But like I said, you
Right.
would probably know this better than I do.
Right. I've heard. I've
Um,
heard the two. I've heard the two.
okay.
That are in because the more traditionally heard version is the one that's in the Cameron film, and that's probably why he included that particular version.
And that's
Because
one, not to cut you off, but I prefer the instrumental version in the Cameron movie.
I agree. I agree. I agree. Because because as we're getting to that point in A Night to Remember, I'm waiting for it, and then they start playing this. I'm like, what the heck are they playing? This isn't the song.
Until the guy actually starts singing.
Until the guy starts singing, and I'm like,
Right,
okay, that's right. There is multiple versions of this song. That's right.
right, right. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'll agree with that. I prefer the version that's in the Cameron movie.
and if we may talk about the band, I think they were portrayed well in both movies as well.
Absolutely.
Um, the they're still serving the purpose that they did that night, where they're trying um, to no avail, calm the people down by playing music. And after a while, they're like, guys, this isn't working.
Yeah. Well,
um,
you got to remember how things were happening at the time too.
oh,
When they,
sure,
so the first lifeboat was not launched until 12:45. That's an hour and 5 minutes after the collision.
right.
And at that point, there's a lot of people probably didn't know that there was not enough lifeboats on the ship for everyone. So in the beginning, people are reluctant to get on the ship. For one, you've got they're venting off the steam, which you see in both movies. They don't portray that 100% correct, though, because the steam, from what everyone has described, the historians, it's so deafening that the officers who are prepping the boats are basically having to do hand signals and eye coordination because they cannot hear unless they are
Well, everyone's
literally
screaming and running, and
screaming to the top of their lungs in each other's ears. That's how loud it was.
yeah, I mean, I could barely hear things my wife is telling me while we're at a Disney park.
Right,
I'm not going to hear anything. I mean, even and I've been on cruise ships where people are talking and moving back and forth. I can't hear anything.
right.
Um, and add that to the panic.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, well, at this point in the beginning, there's no panic at first because you've got all that noise. You've got it's freezing outside even before you get in the water. It's definitely cold, and there are people who, for whatever reason, they don't believe the ship's going to sink. So you don't have a lot of people willing to get into the lifeboats in the beginning. And I think A Night to
well,
Remember did
and I
that
think that has to
better.
do with the fact that they'd been told it's an unsinkable ship.
Which is something they read more. I think was more of a media thing than it was. I don't I don't
Oh,
ever
sure.
remember seeing any accounts where anyone with a White Star Line said the Titanic and the Olympic are unsinkable. Quote.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, at the beginning, not a lot of people are wanting to get into the boats, but as the ship is sinking more and more and more towards the end, when there's only a few boats left, that's when the panic is really kicking in. And you see this with Lightoller throughout A Night to Remember. We've got an interesting portrayal of Lightoller. They're kind of different in both films.
Yeah,
So
I like Light Toller's portrayal in A Night to Remember better.
I think he is portrayed better in A Night to Remember. in. Well, we don't really get a whole lot of
We
him.
don't see much of Lightoller. I mean, I
No.
only knew of Lightoller because he is mentioned in the Cameron film. I don't remember. I offhand can't remember where.
Well,
Um,
he's the one. He pulls the gun and he get back or I'll shoot you all like dogs.
oh, that's right. That's right.
That's Lightoller. You
That's
know,
right.
whereas he Lightoller kind of becomes the star of the movie in A Night to Remember, and I guess they
Yeah.
did that because he was the senior most officer to survive.
Right.
So that's probably why they told that movie from the story of his perspective. I would assume.
Which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they did, in one sense, they got him right in both movies. Where, well, he doesn't. They don't really show it much in Cameron's movie, but you had two things going on each side of the show. Lightoller took Smith's orders as women and children only, whereas
Right.
Murdoch interpreted it as women and children first. That's why even in the Cameron movie, Cal and his manservant or whatever, like, tells Cal, there's one on the other side letting men in, and he's referring to Murdoch.
Right. Which is where he pays him off.
Yes, but we've covered that, so I won't go back on that. But
Right.
yeah, I definitely think Lightoller was portrayed better in A Night to Remember.
How do you feel Smith was portrayed in both films?
I preferred him in A Night to Remember as well because one of the things, there was this kind of undercurrent or under subtle theme thing going on in Cameron's movie where well, not all, but a good bit of the officers, or Smith himself, the first class passengers, they all seem to be kind of ignorant and living in their own little high society uppity bubble, and they
Mhm.
weren't as street smart, I guess would be a way to put it,
Sure.
compared to the
Sure.
third class passengers. They didn't maybe have as much common sense. At least that's
Well,
the vibe I got from it.
yeah, I definitely get that ivory tower kind of vibe. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and I definitely felt that to a small degree with Smith because, there's this part when the sinking, and the lady with the baby walks up to him. She's like, Capitan, Capitan, where should I go? And he's got this appalled look on his face, like, how
But
dare
I
you
don't know what
ask
to
me
do.
this? Yeah, or that even.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. He kind of basically deer in headlights,
Right.
where he seemed a little more calm, cool, and collective in A Night to Remember. And we don't know truthfully how the man behaved, but
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I
There
I
were
tend to
parts.
side with A Night to Remember on his portrayal.
Yeah, I would too, but like there are parts like that, like you described, but there are also parts that where he was conflicted between doing what he knew to do as captain of the ship and almost kind of being under the thumb of the shipbuilders of Andrews and Ismay and those guys. So I would think that like his judgment would be higher up than their judgment.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, he will act, as he even says in A Night to Remember. He said he starts acting on Andrews' advice, not Andrews' orders. There's a
Right.
difference,
Yeah.
and that was a smart thing to do.
Yeah. And
And
I did like that they set up the lifeboat situation, where like you see the lifeboats um and Rose says that like if you pardon me for asking if that there is not a room for anyone on enough room for everyone on board, and Andrew says for about half actually,
right,
uh, and kind of dismisses it. Um, but maybe that
right,
was the mentality. I don't know. I wasn't there, so it's
correct.
just interesting. Just interesting.
So we're at the 1 hour mark, so we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon.
Okay,
No big secret that you've already even said as much that you prefer the Cameron movie, but
I do. I do.
um,
I just think that it. obviously it makes some mistakes as we've discussed, but I think it gets more right than it gets wrong. And obviously they have more experience, they have more information. I think that I, as I've said, I watched the singing scene so many times that I marvel at it still.
Oh yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Cinematography, effects, all that. Yeah, A Night to
yeah.
Remember can't touch the Cameron movie,
Oh,
obviously.
absolutely not. And I'm sure if and 50 some odd years they decide to make a Titanic movie, that director will eclipse Cameron.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sure, because more information is coming out all the time, and history is always changing. So, but yes, I definitely prefer the Cameron film because
Yeah.
it's as I watched it recently because whether this was intentional or not, after the Titan sub crashing, Titanic got added to Netflix. Um,
I think that was already in Netflix's plans prior to
yeah,
that.
it's just the timing was weird.
It was, but it's coincidence. At least I
Yeah,
believe it
it was
is.
it was 100% coincidence. And since it was on Netflix, I can watch it at work because
Right.
right now in the summer it's not as busy as it would be in other times of the year. And I was just struck like it's one of my top 10 favorite films of all time,
Right.
and
So
I just love it. It's really good. I mean,
so
even the Jack and Rose stuff, like people criticize it. I still enjoy it. I still like it. It's still enjoyable to me, and I still get a little misty when Jack dies.
so
Don't lie.
as I've said, I get why Cameron did that. I completely understand that. For me, um, the historian in me definitely prefers A Night to Remember, but I can most absolutely appreciate the Cameron movie for everything it offers as well. I think it's a great movie.
Mhm.
Um, this is one thing that, and we talked about this in the very beginning, where people younger than me who didn't know anything about the Titanic, after watching this movie inspired them to go and do research and become historians who know way more about this ship than I could ever know about them. So that
Right.
is one aspect of the Cameron movie that I can truly, truly appreciate. I love that,
Hmm.
that movie was able to do that for so many people. And
And it just
truthfully,
got and it just got re-released this year. I think it was this year. It got
it was this
re-released
year.
this year. I wanted to go see it, but
Right.
I couldn't make it work.
So for me, with watching the Cameron movie, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I remember when the first time I saw a trailer for the movie was we went to the theater, me and some friends, and watched this movie called Breakdown, starring Kurt Russell, and that was the first time the Titanic trailer played in front of any movie. And I remember thinking, "Oh my god, I got to see this! It's Titanic. We're
Right.
actually going to get a big budget movie." So for me, the movie was, whereas other people, the movie was a resulted in them becoming historians on the ship. Um, my interest in the ship was the result of me going watch the movie. So it was
That's
opposite of
that's really
me.
cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
So I was opposite of that. I was fascinated with the ship before the movie. However, the movie inspired me to go and seek out other Titanic movies. And I remember, I'll never forget this in 1998 because the movie came out in 97. In December of 97, 1998, I go into Blockbuster Video. and
Those existed, people. You would go
yeah,
to a store
yeah,
and rent a movie and then bring it back.
right. You had to give it back. So I go to Blockbuster, and what do I find? A Night to Remember. And what's on the cover of A Night to Remember? The Titanic. Like, I've got to see this. So the movie, Cameron's movie, inspired me to check out other Titanic movies. Unfortunately, that's the only other good one. If you believe it or not, there is actually a German propaganda film about the Titanic, and it's called Titanic, that came out during World War II, and they have a Nazi officer that's part of the Titanic's officer crew, and he's, of course, the lone good guy. And all the British officers are these mean, mustache twirling, as
Oh
you say,
gosh.
bad guys. Absolutely horrible. I never watched the movie, and I never will because, I mean, talk about a bunch of nonsense.
Right.
But that's one of the other ones. There is a other movie that, believe it or not, came out in 1912, and it was, I don't know if she acted in it or if she helped produce it, but one of the survivors was affiliated with that movie.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I would agree with most historians that A Night to Remember was the more historically accurate film, with the exception of the final plunge.
Right.
And
And I
uh,
love the last shot of the movie where it's just the water, and then you got the little um inner tube that's got the Titanic written on it.
yes,
It's a great
yes,
shot.
absolutely.
It's such a sobering note to end on.
But they try to end it on a positive note with well, their story doesn't end here. As a result, you've got the International Ice
Sequel.
Patrol and no sequel. But yeah, the International Ice Patrol, the 24-hour wireless vigil on all ships, lifeboats for all. Because that's one thing, Stanley Lord and the Californian was pretty much damned, just like Ismay was for in Lord's case for not doing enough, and I agree with that assessment. Um, his wireless operator, his name was Cyril Evans, and you can't really fault him. He was asleep during the incident. It was not law at the time to have 24-hour wireless watch.
Mhm.
Why didn't Stanley Lord send somebody to wake him up and get on his headset and find out what was going on with Titanic? Because here's the thing. Their officers in the inquiries have said as much. They knew the Titanic was the only ship of that size near them, and they saw the lights from the Titanic. And one of the officers even said that she looked, quote unquote, queer in the water, as if she was listening. They knew these things. Why are you seeing the ship fire rockets and you're trying to contact them with a light that could be mistaken as the light on a mast? Instead of, it was as simple, go down to your wireless room, wake up Cyril Evans, get him on the headset.
We'll never know.
We won't, and that's just the way things are.
Yeah.
But I think we'll wrap it up there because we've kind of gone over an hour now. I do thank you, my friend, for coming on and having this discussion with me. I thought it
Absolutely.
was fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was fun. It's fun. It was fun to watch A Night to Remember because it's a movie I've known about. I think I've wanted to watch it, but I think the this stream gave me the nice kick in the pants I needed to finally sit down and watch it.
Good.
Uh,
I'm glad it did.
yeah, it was good. Like I said, I prefer the James Cameron film just because I've seen it more and
Hmm.
it's more
Sure.
ingrained in me, and so um, I mean, no offense, I probably won't watch A Night to Remember again. Um,
It's not everyone's cup of tea. I mean, you
um,
really, to me, you have to be into the Titanic in the way that I am to want to go back and
sure,
continuously watch
absolutely,
the movie.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, I definitely will be watching the James Cameron film with a new set of eyes now. That's for sure. Um, but
Cool.
we'll still enjoy it. I mean, it's
Oh
still in
yeah.
the top five highest grossing movies of all time,
Oh yeah, and rightfully so.
and it's still in the wake of Marvel movies and Star Wars and other stuff that's come out since
Right.
then. It's for
Well,
it to still be in the top spot is is amazing.
and I'll leave us with this. And for one of the reasons for that is because it's talking about, or it portrays a mostly accurate sinking of probably the most famous ship of all time. I mean, there's only one ship that might be more famous in history than the Titanic, and that would be the Ark.
That is true.
Okay, so that probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sure.
right. So
And it's been
any
re-released a few times, but the fact that people keep flocking to this movie,
right.
despite all the complaints and despite all of the, like could Jack and Rose survive together? Why wasn't there room on the board? Or whatever complaints there are about this movie, people
Right.
will still rush out to see it because it's a cinematic event film that you want to see again and again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, when it came out this year, I was like, I want to see this. I want to go out to the theater. I just wasn't able to.
Right.
Um, I mean, um, um, on my wife and I's honeymoon, we watched we watched movies for like a couple days, and one of the movies we watched was Titanic because we both love that film, and it's
Excellent.
a good movie, and I will probably love it to the day I die.
So, do you have any social media, anything like that you want to pimp before
I
we call it
have
a
I have
wrap?
Instagram. I have Instagram. I'm on Instagram.com/Tim Writes Today. That's where you can find me. I don't post a lot, but I'm there. um, and I also whenever I do watch a movie, I always post it on my letterbox, which is letterbox.com. I think it's slash Tim Watches Today. Um, so that's where people can find me.
Okay. And what do you write about?
Um, I write a lot. I write poetry. I write. Currently writing some story ideas to hopefully be published as books. That kind of thing.
Excellent.
I'm always writing things all the time.
Nice.
Yes. So
All right. Well, that is going to do it. I'm sure this is going to get a bunch of views on the replay as well. These streams usually do. So, anyone who tuned in throughout the stream, thanks for watching. I certainly appreciate it. If you like the
thanks for tuning in
content,
this long.
exactly. So, if you like the content, like and subscribe. It supports the channel, helps out in more ways than you can imagine. And that's going to do it. So for Tim and for myself, we appreciate you guys. And until the next time, well, should I say it?
Go ahead. Why not?
I'm not going to say drive safely. I'm going to say iceberg right ahead. Good night, everybody.
Good night.